to go.
Okay, great. Good morning. Hello, and welcome to today's meeting of the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee. I'm glad to see everybody here today, even by teleconference, as I am. So thank you all very much. Just a quick reminder, this meeting is being live streamed to the CPE YouTube channel, and audio and video is being recorded. Heather, can you please call roll for us?
Absolutely. Dr. Mohammed Babar, Mr. Colby Burks, Ms. Lori Harper.
Here.
Ms. Karen Huber.
Here.
Mr. Lucas Spencer.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson.
Here.
Ms. Vidya Ravichandran. Dr. Robert Sack. And Mr. Kevin Weaver. He is going to be here shortly. He had a work thing that's running late, so he'll be joining us at about 10:30. And then I see Mr. Colby Burks just joined. So I'll go back and put him. So we have a quorum now.
Okay,
and I think Vidya will be joining shortly.
great. Appreciate that. I don't know who is in the room with you. Is Dr. Thompson in the room today? President Thompson?
I believe he is going to be joining us. He may be on another call right now.
Okay, then we will wait and see when he joins, if he has anything he'd like to say, but we'll talk about the minutes from our June 8th meeting, which were in your meeting materials. Are there any objections to those as presented? Okay, if none, then they are approved as distributed. I guess we'll keep moving forward. At the end of our last meeting, Stephanie Ashley from EKU Facilitation Center discussed the results of an environmental scan that was conducted over the previous 3 months. She didn't get much time to dig into the results. So before we do anything else, I'd like to ask Lee to provide a high-level review of those key findings with the group to help us as we develop to begin to develop the agenda.
Thank you, Chair Harper. Let me pull up my notes here.
Well, as you're doing that, I see that President Thompson is trying to connect, and if you want to give him just a minute. President Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to address to the committee today? He's muted. You are muted.
Thank you, Chair Harper. That's my computer today. As Lena had told you, I've had computer problems, so I've set up a secondary system here. Hopefully it'll work. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Good morning, committee. Good to see everybody. Hope you had a good 4th of July. I took a little time off last week, did a little work while taking time off, but took a little time off and it was good. You know, today we're going to be able to see, and thanks to Lee and her team for putting this together, be able to see truly the outline of where we're going with our next agenda. I'm really happy with this. I mean, we've gone back and forth. The way we are thinking about our umbrella is still our North Star being, you know, the educational attainment goal that we have of 60% by 2030. But within that, you know, that North Star that has to operationalize itself in a way that we help all Kentuckians to be successful. So looking at equity as it operationalizes itself within that attainment goal is truly crucial to the way that we think about this and talk about this. And the way it's been outlined then with those two as the priorities and then all the goals, looking at truly not just where we were at before in our agenda, but where we're going and needing to go to make sure that we connect all parts from that P20 system all the way through into the workforce. How we become that powerful entity, if you will, to create that strong educated workforce, to create a strong Kentucky, especially around economic development, civic engagement, and just the overall elements of what good higher education brings. So I'm excited that you get a chance to see this today, to give us your response, your reaction. I also will say that as we move into doing the strategies, you'll have other opportunities to get engaged. But I appreciate this committee for being that committee, and Lori, for you doing this work as the chair of that committee to make sure that we have kept our eyes on the ball. I'm extremely happy with where we've ended up here. When we started this out, I knew we'd end up in a good place because I have faith in Lee. But we've ended up even in a better place than I even thought we would. And that's not underestimating you, Lee. That's just trying to give you a compliment. So Chair Harper, that's my report. Thank you.
Well, let me jump in real quick. Thank you, Chair Harper, and good morning, everybody. We have a couple staff out on vacation this week, so you're going to hear a lot from me today, so apologies in advance. But as President Thompson mentioned, this is an important day for the planning process because we're building the foundation of this strategic plan. And today we're going to consider for approval, mission, vision, and values. And we're certainly going to be jumping into sort of the foundational goals and priorities of the agenda to get your feedback on that. Heather, if you could advance to the agenda slide for the meeting. And then if you could advance to the next slide. So we wanted, as Chair Harper mentioned, to go briefly back over the environmental scan that really has been going on the last several months. Our partners at the EKU Facilitation Center did a terrific work gathering information. You see on the screen here, we did 29 executive interviews, so one-on-one interviews with state leaders, college presidents, national leaders in higher education, and got great feedback about the direction the state should be looking to go over the next several years. We had topic-specific discussion groups where we brought in experts around key policy issues like affordability, P to 20 transitions, adult learners, and a couple of others. We had 6 lengthy focus group discussions with specific groups, like our college provosts, student advisory group, faculty advisory group, and several others to really give us some good feedback as well. And of course, discussion with the board and committee members about the agenda. Let's see here. Heather, if you could give me the next slide. So, as the EKU folks did their work, 4 major themes quickly began to emerge in the conversation. So, one, and it came up over and over again, and we'll talk about this more today, are concerns about college affordability. The second was really the need to double down on efforts to ensure more students complete their programs in a timely manner. So we're just losing too many learners before they make it to the finish line. The third is the need to break down barriers to college enrollment, so recruitment enrollment issues, both for traditional and adult students. We have shared a number of times over the last year or so that we're seeing a decline in the number of high school graduates who are enrolling in college. And, combined with that, due to the pandemic and other reasons, we're really seeing a precipitous drop in the adult enrollment in post-secondary education, which is really having an effect on our workforce readiness. And then the fourth issue that came up in terms of a theme was equity. President Thompson mentioned this, like affordability, concerns about equity came up in most of the conversations. There were a lot of concerns and recommendations about supporting students of color and students from lower income backgrounds, but also a lot of discussion about other populations where we are seeing some equity gaps as we consider student support systems and efforts to help students succeed. So Heather, next slide. So we wanted also in the research to get some direct feedback about the state's 60 by 30 educational attainment goal. This is, as you know, our commitment to get at least 60% of the working age population to post-secondary degree or credential attainment by 2030. The good news is there was broad support that Kentucky maintains a quantifiable goal like the 60 by 30 goal to keep our work focused. Some folks we talked to felt like the goal was too conservative, that we ought to be able to shoot beyond 60%, while probably an equal number of folks really raised some cautions about the goal being too ambitious, particularly in an environment, after the pandemic and decreased resources. But in general, we felt like we've hit a pretty good balance point with this goal. And, certainly it's something that we're going to continue to pursue. A number of respondents pushed us to really think and articulate the why behind the goal more clearly and get that message out there to the public better. And then other suggestions included doing more detailed analysis to look at the goal regionally and by demographic group so that, we can say that Kentucky is doing well on our attainment goal overall, but if, we're not doing well in a certain part of the state, then clearly we need to be rethinking our strategies. Heather, next slide, please. So we asked specifically about what folks thought were the most prominent barriers facing students in the post-secondary system generally. Again, a lot of conversation around college affordability. Certainly issues of student debt came up, financial literacy, perceptions about college costs. There was a lot of discussion about academic, social, and emotional readiness levels of many students who are transitioning or trying to transition to college. Again, there was a focus on adult learners that we know if we're going to hit our attainment goal, this is a population we really need to zero in on more effectively, certainly more effectively than we're doing currently. Things like childcare was highlighted as a key barrier for adults in enrolling and completing college. A lot of discussion about closing equity gaps, whether, again, it's access to digital resources or, the issue of foster kids and their access to post-secondary education came up. Veterans and whether or not they're getting the kinds of support systems they need. Income gaps, obviously, and race and ethnic equity gaps. There was also concerns and, certainly a growing concerns about the growing level of public skepticism about higher education. Concerns that there seems to be a growing lack of confidence in the return on investment of time and money related to post-secondary education. So that, again, was one of those barriers that came up virtually in every conversation. Heather, next slide, please. So to conclude this sort of quick run through of the environmental scan and the research that we've done over the last couple of months, we asked the groups and interviewees about, if they had sort of the power to decide where Kentucky focused our time and resources in the next agenda, what would we need to focus on to make sure that we had strong outcomes for Kentucky students? So, in general, folks felt like the agenda is addressing the right areas, the current agenda, but that really the issue is that we need to double down in some of these areas we've been talking about, P-12 partnerships, recruitment and enrollment, college affordability, adult learners, student success, and demonstrating the value of higher education. There were lots of specific ideas about strategies and programs the state ought to be thinking about, and we're going to talk about those at future meetings. But just in terms of the broad themes and the broad areas, this really is what came up most often. So that was a very quick overview. Chair Harper, that concludes my report out on the environmental scan. I'm happy to answer any questions or try to provide any clarifying comments.
Are there any questions? I hope you all took the initiative to look at the board packet and the committee packet rather. I was surprised how many different groups of people that you reached out and touched to get this data. So I do appreciate that. But are there any other questions from the committee?
Lee, was there any more information on, if you can go back one more slide, on that public perception on the value of higher education? Was there any more detail on like specific things that they were looking at in that one? That I was asked because those are like feelings pieces, where some of the others are more data driven. I didn't know if there was more context around that.
Well, I think there is a way to quantify this pretty clearly, and it has to do with whether students are actually transitioning into post-secondary education and whether or not they're dropping out. The value equation plays a big role in that. I think that we're hearing, from leaders in the state and others that maybe college isn't something people need to pursue, or that there are different ways to be successful in the workforce. And so I think, there's that set of perhaps negative perceptions out there. Certainly concerns about college costs are making people question of, the return on investment for post-secondary education. Aaron has spent, countless hours out in the public listening to people's concerns and perceptions. So I don't know if you want to weigh in, Aaron, and talk about this, because I think this is one of the most important areas that we need to address.
Well, it is. And Luke, I appreciate you bringing that up, because to me, this is where, and Kentucky has been on the forefront of trying to, quote unquote, quantify quality. What I mean, to me, this is a quality question. To me, if people perceive that college is not worth it, then they perceive that there's a lack of quality in the product or the return on investment. So what I know is that it is a feel question, if you will, a feel, F-E-E-L. That's what I think, Luke, that's what you said. It is. There's a perception that it's not worth it. So we provide them with data, and we're winning people over by showing them that, but it still hasn't stopped that perception at the level we need to. This is why we need to get employers engaged on the front end, because that helps us to say that employers believe that we are providing them with the necessary person to do the jobs that they feel that's important. That's number one. Number two, we have to also get the student to say that whatever education I received, whether it's a certificate or a graduate degree or a baccalaureate degree, whatever, that not only prepared me to do the work I wanted to do, but it prepared me to operate in society. So somehow we've got to start getting that information on the back end. That's easier said than done. But, what we've done with this new tool we have, we're giving them a lot of return on investment now up front where they can easily get that. So we're trying to address that from at least the standpoint CPE has. But I think your question is for me, the question that we have to figure out in this next agenda. How do we quantify quality? How do we help people to know that value proposition is real and is in fact for them and their kids and other folk who they want to get engaged with it?
Yeah, no, I very much agree. And I was thinking the tool is getting on the front end of, because affordability is not just the price; it's helping them make the right choices, right? Because things are affordable based on how much income you have and what choices you make. So helping them get into the right programs that they can finish on time at a reasonable price and coming out with the right skills. The price of the education could stay the same. We just funneling them in the right direction. And that gives you a sense of better value, right? So 100%.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's exactly the set of strategies we need to be talking about here. You're not going to come up with a magic number for quality, right? You're not, because it means something different to everybody. I mean, what you may perceive as quality, I may not. So how do we help them to understand what they perceive and then move them in the direction that they need to buy that product, if you will, that major, that amount of loans that they're going to actually have to get that degree, and what kind of outcomes they can expect from that degree, right? Or that certificate. I think you're absolutely right. And so that's really, but it's the item. That's why the value proposition has to stay here for me in this conversation, has to stay here in this agenda, because that's the item. We've got 50% of people graduating from high school going to college. There's a half of them that believe that college isn't for them to some degree, whether they perceive it as they can afford it or that it's not worth it or some other reason, right? Or maybe they got parents really rich and gave them money, who knows? But the idea that that's exactly the kind of direction we need to go in this agenda.
Any
Heather,
questions?
next slide, please. Yeah. I believe that the committee is, we're at a point where you all were presented with draft mission, vision, and value statements in the last meeting. And so we wanted to go ahead and put these in front of the committee for official approval. So I'm happy to run through these again, Chair Harper, or you may want to do it.
Okay, hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to see these prior. So the current, as you can see, is on the left side of your screen, which says Kentucky will experience greater prosperity and a higher quality of life through increased educational attainment, workforce readiness, research, and innovation. And what has been proposed now is Kentucky will be a national leader in building a strong, sustainable, equitable economy through increased educational attainment and affordable, high-quality post-secondary programs. Any comments regarding that change?
Chair Harper, I don't know if you all want to take a vote on each individual item or whether or not you want to take a vote at the end after you go through the mission, vision, and values.
Does anybody have a preference?
Lori, sorry, I came in late. This is Bob Stat. Sorry, I came in late, but as a preference goes, lumping them together at the end is fine with me.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Bob. And I guess that is what we'll do. So the second is proposed changes. Again, the current is on the left. It says Kentucky's post-secondary system enhances the health and well-being of our citizens by preparing students to create and find new knowledge and excel in a global economy and culture. And the proposed change is Kentucky's post-secondary education or post-secondary system prepares students to be lifelong learners and excel in a diverse, knowledge-based economy. Post-secondary education drives innovation, enhances health and well-being, breaks the cycle of generational poverty, and improves quality of life.
Chair Harper, I don't know if you want to take any statements now, but I have to tell you that there were a lot of inputs or a lot of back and forth, a whole lot of people to get here. And I just want to make one comment. In Kentucky, we're 44th in the nation in poverty. And our health is, in fact, having higher education really address this straight on is truly, I think, a key piece of this conversation, at least for us, or for me. And so I all the inputs we have from all different kinds of people, I really appreciate seeing those two pieces in this mission. Obviously, I had a little bit to say in these things back and forth, so not to say I haven't seen this at least a million times before now. But those two items I would point out as being crucial to how we should be thinking about the work we're doing.
All right. And just to follow up on that, I think, we heard time and time again that we need to insert the notion that higher education enhances social mobility. And so that's, again, to President Thompson's point, inserting the reference to breaking the cycle of generational poverty is really important to folks.
And moving on to the value statement. Again, on the left is the current: academic excellence and student success, broad access to adult and higher education, both powerful tools to combat poverty, inclusion, equity, and diversity, post-secondary education's ability to catalyze economic and community development, funding for post-secondary education as a critical investment in Kentucky's future, collaboration and mutual respect among all post-secondary providers and partners, business and community partnerships, accountability, transparency, and fiscal stewardship. So we whittled this down a little bit more. So the proposed is inclusion, equity, and diversity, quality and excellence, affordability and accessibility, innovation, business and community partnerships, transparency and accountability, institutional collaboration, and comprehensive student support. So those were the three, the vision, mission, and value statements. Do we have any comments, any questions to further help people prepare for a decision to move on this? So if not, if anybody's prepared to make a motion, I would entertain one, just so we can continue to move.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Bob. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Thank you. Motion carries. Appreciate that. Now we'll move forward with, I guess, our the draft framework, which is our next strategic. The agenda is reviewed of the draft framework for the new agenda. We're not taking any action today on this, but we wanted to put these ideas in front of the group and get your feedback, as we did with the mission, vision, and values at the last meeting. Staff will take back our suggestions and any other needed changes and present a final draft for approval at the August 11th meeting. So Lee, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harper. Heather, if you could advance the slide. So we wanted to spend a little time with you today in discussion about the framework. And I wanted to give a high-level view of what the overall structure of the agenda will look like, just to give you a sense of the path we're going to take in the decision-making process. We, of course, start with mission, vision, and values, and appreciate your approval on those. Then we have two cross-cutting priority areas that will weave through the entire agenda, and we'll talk about those in just a second. The next level are specific strategic goals that work to take the mission, the vision, and the values and really make them more actionable. Then we have objectives that will be developed for each strategic goal to guide and measure progress on the goals. And then we move down to strategies, how the agenda will actually be executed. So for this agenda, we're going to propose that there be both state and campus level strategies supporting each objectives. In the current agenda, there's been some confusion about who owns strategies and who's accountable, for pushing them forward. The campus will say, well, is this a CPE strategy or is this a campus strategy? What's our role? This really doesn't align with our mission, those sorts of comments. So we're going to propose that we have state level strategies that CPE and our state partners will own, but that each campus, based on their mission and their priorities, will also develop strategies that align with the state's objectives. And so we'll talk about the process of developing those at a meeting in August, but wanted to put that on the table as a possible approach. Then after the strategies, of course, at the state level and at the campus level, there need to be action steps or tactical steps to implement the strategies. The agenda, which we're going to take to the board in November after this committee approves it, we're only going to be going as far as state level strategies for November. At some point in the winter or spring, we're going to be reviewing campus level strategies and ask for them to report out to the full board. But for today's discussion, we're really only going to focus on the top 2 items in this framework. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about what we were proposing as our 2 cross-cutting priorities, and President Thompson has really alluded to both of these. We want to keep our focus on educational attainment and also on equity. So these 2 priorities are really going to support the full agenda, weave throughout it, will be evident in each of the strategic goals and objectives. So attainment is about, increasing the percent of Kentuckians who have a post-secondary degree or credential. We know this is important to grow the economy, to create a better prepared workforce. It improves Kentucky in other ways, including better health, more vibrant communities, more engaged citizens, and it's really captured in our 60 by 30 goal. Equity is about making sure our post-secondary system does everything that it can do to ensure our learners who have been left behind historically are well supported, that they have clear pathways to success. We're going to continue to focus on underrepresented minority populations and low-income students as is part of our performance funding model and our current accountability system. But as I mentioned before, we need to do more to assist working parents and other demographic groups in the state that have specific challenges reaching the finish line in terms of post-secondary education. Next slide, please. So based on the environmental scan and our research and the work that we're currently doing, we are proposing 4 strategic goals that focus in on specific policy and program areas. So the first is ensuring post-secondary education is affordable for all Kentuckians. The second is to ensure more students successfully transition to college, that they progress through the system, and that they earn degrees and credentials. In the area of talent development, we want to educate a globally competitive workforce and increase research and innovation to fuel job creation and economic growth. And then going back to our conversation about value, we want to improve the public understanding that post-secondary education is the key to greater economic opportunity and economic growth. So I'm happy to stop here for questions, but I am going to provide a little more background on each of these 4 strategic goals in the next slides. Heather, you want to move forward with the next slide? So there's really not much more that I think I can add to the discussion around affordability as a key focus and concern. It's come up consistently over the years in our conversations and with our environmental scan. Whether these affordability barriers are perceived, which is the case in many situations where students just feel like there is an affordability gap that they can't cross, even if it is possible, or if those affordability gaps are real. Our research and other research shows that it is the major barrier to enrollment and completion. It's of course an equity issue. It's a communications and advising issue. It speaks to issues about making sure students have opportunities to get post-secondary education while in high school and begin to benefit from the opportunities for free post-secondary programs through dual credit or AP. It's about keeping tuition and fee increases as moderate as possible. making need-based financial aid as broadly accessible as possible. And it's also speaks to the need for better research and more targeted strategies around higher ed affordability issues. So that's what this goal is really about. Does anybody have any questions about that or comments or thoughts?
Lee, it just seems to me that this whole affordability comes down to successful advising in the high schools and at the college level, because you're talking about people or misunderstandings about college costs. How can we we need better buy-in from the secondary schools as well as the advising groups. That's my comment.
I completely agree. And President Thompson, who's been leading the education continuum, I think has heard those same comments over and over again. President Thompson, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, I do. And Dr. Stad, I think you're right. I think there's two pieces, though, that we should consider when it comes to the advising. One, well, maybe three pieces. One is, how do we help students early enough to understand really what college is, right? And understand how that leads to a better output for their lives. And I'm thinking 7th, 8th grade, like we do with our Gear Up. Then it comes into play, how do they see themselves operationalizing themselves in that? We can use our dual credit and a variety of other things, but we need that college and career advisor in high school really helping them to understand what all the choices are and how to maneuver the process from FAFSA to you name it. And then the third piece is truly how we incorporate career advising and other advising, proactive advising in college in the first year, not wait till the senior year. How do we connect all of those in a very systematic way from 7th grade on to do that and focus on the outputs of how to mix that major with the career? I think you hit the nail on the head. So it becomes not just one kind of advising in high school or college, but all those advising systems in place that would help the student to realize his or her goal based on where they want to go. And not thinking that college is one size fits all. It may be a certificate, in a technical field, or once again, it may be getting a degree in sociology, who knows? But, all of those things have to work together. So I think you've hit the nail on the head with that.
If there are no other questions about the affordability goal, Heather, if you'll jump to the next slide. So the second goal, student success, is really the heart of the strategic agenda, and it has been for a number of years. It is really at the core of the mission of our work. As we've shared a number of times, we are, well, as I said earlier today, we're seeing a steady decline in the percent of recent high school graduates moving on to college. We are seeing, there is good news. We are seeing our graduation and completion rates increasing due to some very strong work on our campuses, and the numbers of students graduating continue to grow. But we still are not where we want to be in terms of getting students through the programs. And again, going back to our equity conversations, particularly in some of our demographic groups where there have historically been some challenges. This goal captures a lot of our work and focus. This really touches on efforts to improve the transition between our P-12 system and college, work with adult learners, the quality and the effectiveness of our academic programs, and our efforts to be more innovative and effective in how we deliver programs. So that's, this is a big comprehensive goal, but I'm happy to respond to any questions, and certainly any thoughts as we begin to develop objectives around this goal and specific strategies. If there are any questions or comments, Heather, I'll get you to move to the next slide. So this goal, talent, we're putting it under the sort of heading of talent, is about ensuring a stronger linkage between post-secondary education in Kentucky and the state's workforce and economic development needs. It's a very intentional and deliberate line that we're drawing in the strategic agenda around how higher education drives economic and workforce development. It's about creating strong alignment between academic programs and employer needs, but it's also really emphasizing the need to help students as they are guided through to a career path that makes sense for them. So, really thinking about career guidance on the front end of a student's college career, how to make sure that, they're being directed through a program in a way that gets them to the finish line and prepared for a career that makes sense for them and also responds to the economic demands that the state has. This is also about capitalizing on, research and teaching and administrative talent on our campuses. We talk mainly about our student focus, but our post-secondary institutions do a ton of work in the communities to help, drive improvements. We are doing great research and applied research to advance innovation and products and businesses. So this part of the agenda really zeroes in on that work. Any questions or comments?
I had a question. Would this piece include looking at the path of a student through from start all the way through to optimize the actual classes they would take for a particular major? Because I'm thinking affordability, getting them through, how do we shorten that amount of time? Are we looking to optimize those and saying, is it down to the level of, how many classes beyond their major they have to take? You hear the stories of, oh, I couldn't get this class, I couldn't get that class, and then it adds an extra year. I don't know how true those are, but again, I'm going back to that perception of value and kind of streamlining that process. Is that where this piece would be, or do we play in that space?
There's going to be bleed over throughout the agenda. So we're going to
Sure.
see different priorities sort of show up in different areas. I would say, first of all, yes, we are absolutely going to focus in on that. I would say it's probably more located in the strategic or the student success goal.
Okay.
I believe Dr. Bell is in the room because, Melissa, you might speak a little bit to some of the work you're doing on curricular design and helping campuses, Luke, to your point, really set up programs so that students can be much more efficiently, move through their programs.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, I don't know if you're in the room still.
Looks like she's coming over to the, she's on mute.
Go.
Yes, I am here, and I can speak very briefly to the fact that we have several initiatives underway. One of them is that we have outlined all the degree pathways for all the majors at all the institutions in the state, and we're looking at the most efficient way to tie those into associate degrees at KCTCS. As part of that same system, there is the capability to analyze the complexity of a curriculum. So this is something that faculty can look at to see where there's bottlenecks, which combination of classes impact student success. Is a really advanced analytical tool that we are going to roll out over the next few years. We have been, in pilot phase, but it is a tool that the faculty can use, administrators can use, and then we will continue advancing time to degree initiatives. And as you mentioned, the importance of advising. So all of those are tied together. So we are trying to have a multi-pronged approach to this.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the talent goal before we move ahead? Heather, if you could take us to the last goal statement. So our last goal we've talked about, I'm sorry, yeah, there we are. this is all about sort of helping shift and improve public and decision maker perceptions and understanding about higher education. It's about our efforts at the state level and at the institution level about communicating the value of post-secondary education to prospective students, their parents, their families, but also to community and business leaders and other decision makers like legislators and others. I think that we have done really a terrific job, and I give President Thompson, the credit for this with our legislators, for example, leading up to this last legislative session. I think that through a lot of good advocacy from the entire post-secondary system, I think we were able to, for the first time, as in a long time, get additional public support for the system. And I think that is evidence of, a recognition of the value of higher education to the future of the state. It's really about engaging the public in a conversation about college and its return on investment. And also being very transparent about college costs and performance. So it's not, sort of whitewashing or just presenting the best face of post-secondary education. It's having an honest and authentic conversation about higher education and why it is so essential. So, I think that we certainly will continue to focus on the Higher Education Matters theme and campaign. And continue to engage deeply in public conversations. But we know that there is much more to be done. CPE and the campus leaders can't do it all. We have to engage influencers to help us carry this message. And so that's going to be a lot of our communications and outreach work as we move forward under this particular goal. Does anybody have any questions about this goal?
Lee, as I read through this, there's just one thing that kind of hit me, and that's in the line, and skepticism about the value and ROI of college. There may be some skepticism, but I'd rather, can we get a bit more positive about that? Instead of skepticism, just, you say it at the bottom about the value of higher education, but
I think that's a good point, Dr. Stat, because clearly it's skepticism only among some groups and some people. So we definitely need to clarify that, and we'll certainly adjust that in the written communications on this.
I think that's an excellent point, and I appreciate you pointing that out, because not everybody is a skeptic. Although there is some skepticism, there's people that have great hope that, in fact, this is the future of their lives, as well as the lives of their children and loved ones. So, Bob, I really appreciate that.
So, Heather, next slide, please. So we're really at the end of a formal presentation on what we're proposing in terms of draft cross-cutting priorities and strategic goals. So I would just invite the committee to, engage in a couple of questions. Are these the right goals and priorities? We're building the foundation of this plan, so we want to make sure that the foundation blocks are correct before we move forward. Are we missing anything specific? And, are they aligned with the policy issues as you see them that we need to be tackling, as a state as we move forward and look to 2030?
This is our time if you want to give any feedback. I know this is the kind of the, as I call it, the quick overview. We've had some really good questions and comments, and thank you so much for those inputs. But again, we're not going to vote on this today, but we is looking for feedback if we have any other additional feedback.
And we're, of course, any of the staff are happy to go offline with any of you if you have thoughts or specific recommendations that might come to you later. All of this work is going to be in draft form until the board adopts it in November. So there's always room to move things around and reemphasize things. But, this is the most important group in determining the direction of this agenda. So welcome your thoughts.
Yeah, and Lee, I just wanted to echo that to the group. I know not everybody is bold about sharing their thoughts in an open forum. So if you read it, send staff your thoughts. I know some folks are more, I need to sit down, I need to read it. We definitely want your thoughts. This is the time, this is the place to provide those. And I want to thank Lee and Dr. Thompson and all the staff there for all this great work. So I think it's definitely spot on in the right direction.
And I want to thank many of you board members. I know Luke, you and I have talked about a lot of this already, and I've had conversations with others. I really appreciate, I hope you all have seen your suggestions incorporated in here. If you paid close enough attention, you probably did, because we do listen to what you all think that we need to go in the direction. And I know I'll just say, Chair Mencher, his is really around that early understanding of what it means to be able to afford, pay for college, what it looks like, how do you get information, how do you transition in that in mind. So we took that as an example along with everything else everybody else said and do it. So we ask you that you do read it indeed.
Just a couple of last comments from me. As Chair Harper mentioned, no need to take any formal action on this today. We will ask that you look at them and take a vote formally at the next meeting, which is on August 11th. At that meeting, you will also get from us some proposed objectives in the beginning look at strategies. So when we look at objectives, you'll start to get a sense of what we're going to measure. What are the big sort of quantifiable goals that we propose to put on the table? So the next meeting is going to be very important too. And we hope to get this information out to you a little bit earlier so you get a chance to look at it and then, have a good, thoughtful discussion at the meeting.
Lee or Aaron, I apologize for getting in late. You may have covered it earlier, but the way I'm hearing things is that we talk about college, and it almost gets framed as a 4-year effort. The post-secondary isn't just 4-year college, and I don't know if that can be incorporated or emphasized or need to be in there, but I just, that was a sense I got just from hearing today.
It is in there. As you all know, Dr. Statt, since I took over this role, I've gone very clear on that college isn't just a 4-year degree. That's listed loudly in the narrative. In my even opening statement, I will even talk about that in the piece, because you're absolutely right. And this has been a problem we've had over a long period of time that we've, and let me tell you this clear, I'm not suggesting we do anything about this because it's in law. Post-secondary is really an interesting word. I explain half my time that, I'm not in charge of high schools because people don't understand what post-secondary is. So there needs to be a whole lot of conversations around the nomenclature. And that's what we found out on a listening tour. A lot of people, a lot of people say, well, why don't you just call yourself the head of higher education? Well, I am, or president of higher education, right? So, and the same thing goes to the idea of what college is. No one ever thinks about the technical schools or a certificate. So you're absolutely right. We need to be really clear on that nomenclature in writing as well as in verbiage as we go into this agenda.
Thank you, Aaron.
Any other comments, questions? I tell you, the CP staff's done a great job to get us as far as we have come. But again, we still have many more things to accomplish before we get this to present to the CP board. So I appreciate everybody's hard work and time today. As Lee said, we're not going to take action on what she just presented, but please take the time in between now and our next meeting give some feedback. If you see anything else, sometimes when you take the time to, hold it in your hand and read it, you see something a little different than as somebody's presenting it. So they want that feedback. So other than that, I guess this may be a shorter meeting than I thought. Any other questions from the committee?
It wasn't necessarily short, it was efficient, Lori.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, the team has really synthesized so much of the conversation and distilled it very well. Thank you so much. It's very concise. Really
Well,
great.
I would agree with Luke, it's efficient, but I want to thank people like Lori, Lydia, all these folks that have spent countless hours on this committee going through this. This is not something that just has popped up. So I want to thank this committee, Chair Harper, for your work.
Well, we appreciate it, and we've got some more meetings to hash out some things. So please, again, be engaged, and give them your feedback. If there are no other comments or questions, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you all. I look forward to our next meeting in August.
Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome.